say you have your session laid out, and you plan the possible results for your game. A simple adventure, finding the evil necromancer who is raising the dead of a nearby village. However, an hour into the game, the players decide to do something completely off the wall. Like instead of going to kill the necromancer, they think, oh yeah, we actually agree with what you're doing, and we want to join you. Suddenly, all your plans have to turn on a dime, and you lament the passing of all your cool notes. How could you have known what was going to happen? Now that it has, what can you do about it? Well, buckle up, because we'll be talking about how to predict player actions tonight on Playing God. I'm Nick Logie, and with me, of course, is Xander Nolan.
Hey, man.
So, Xander, what happens when your players go completely off the rails?
Generally, it depends on the situation, but the players typically, when they do go off of the rails, not necessarily in a railroading fashion, but when they do something completely out of the ordinary and off the wall, and there's no way for you to really anticipate that movement, the best thing that you can do, I've found, is have 5 or 6 kind of small little hitch backup plans that you can quickly apply to the situation. It helps things kind of move smoothly, but it depends on how they go off the rails.
Let's assume some basic premises. First of all, it doesn't matter whether or not you are doing a big freeform game or you're like hyper railroading anything. You have your notes laid out because no matter what, you're gonna have like ideas on how they're gonna progress through the story,
Oh,
what
absolutely.
objectives they need to succeed at, or you might plan to fail for. We're talking like even a module book or one of the pre-prepared adventures. You have one of those. You know what should happen. But this is like, what the fuck? Where did you even come up with this idea, guys?
Yeah, and honestly, it happens more often than people think. So we're gonna go ahead and use the players joining the necromancer as a kind of baseline for that, because that's pretty off the wall and exceptionally
Yeah, you
unexpected.
got your evil guy, and even like they don't just straight up decide to join you. We could also even assume that maybe there's like some permanent alignment magic that happened, and then your players still end up joining them. And even this, though you didn't plan for that to happen, like how would you go about like changing things in order to fit the new story?
Yeah. Well, the first thing in this particular instance is first have that necromancer fleshed out as a character. Who are they? What are their goals? Why are they doing this? And if you have the basic understanding, this necromancer is raising dead so that he can amass a small army to take on a noble estate, a few provinces over, and try and get their land. Da 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 da. And if they suddenly join this necromancer, oh hey, this is some things that kind of think on their own and they want to help me. All right, cool. I'll tell you what. How about you guys go over to this particular province, go and talk with this noble. If he doesn't give up his land, chop his fucking head off. So,
Yeah, he
you know,
becomes
it,
a de facto quest giver. You didn't
yeah,
expect it to happen, but I mean, he rolled with the punches, and he needs his underlings to do shit.
yeah,
And they can't all
and
be mindless, hive-minded controls that controlled units that he has to pay attention to all the time. So having a group of adventurers would be like, hey, this is a hell of a boon right here.
yeah, this works. And the best way to kind of wing it on the fly, more along the lines, is if your NPC, this this necromancer, uh, if the players want to take this as being a sort of kind of dark and evil based campaign, and they want to try and they want to do bad stuff, they want to loot and pillage and murder and ha 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 raise your torches, then that just becomes what the campaign is about. And the rest of the things could be happening in the background. Another set of adventurers are coming to take care of them. It happens the reverse all the time. So as long as you understand the NPC and you understand what should be happening on this side of the fence, on the quote unquote good aligned side, then you can reasonably predict what's going to happen on the evil side of that same fence.
Right.
And there you could be going to on the exact same quests, but the flavor is what's changed.
Yeah, and you don't even
So
have to like
yeah,
rewrite everything. As long presumably you've already have like the motivations for this necromancer laid out, or whatever in this villain example. Like you already know who you're dealing with. It even could be like a longer campaign, um, convincing after many debates like in play, if you want to handle it that way, where one side or the other actually is finally swayed. And you could still use like the same, like not the exact same notes, but you could take those beats that you had before, but just even if you have to take a minute, like after this crazy thing has happened, you can just be like, hold on, you think it through for a few minutes, you write out a couple, bullet
Mhm.
points, and then you can go from there because it might in some cases be drastically different.
Oh yeah. Now, side note, for you guys listening at home, or wherever you're listening to us, thank you for listening, by the way. Uh, there is absolutely nothing wrong with taking, like, say, they hit you with something real big and real out of the ordinary suddenly, like this example. It take a step back. Like this would make a great time to take a bio break, refill sodas, stuff like that. And that 5-10 minutes where you have that to really to think about what's going to happen, you can kind of take all of the plug points that you have in your notes, and just come up with just one way to move the story along into this new course path. You only need the one because you can continue to think it through and process it out over the next week or 2 weeks that you have before your next session. It gives you plenty of time. But if you can plug one single adventure into that spot, then uh, it's not going to be as difficult. So
One of
let's
the
say,
well,
or go ahead.
one of the beauties of this whole process is that if the players have decided they're going to do something really off the wall, they've pretty much just written your plot for you. Because they've
Oh yeah,
said, this is what I want to do, and all you have to do is like, okay, cool. How do I
all
apply
right.
the mechanics to this?
Yeah. Well, what else do you want to do? Let's keep this train going. So let's say, for example, you were sending the player characters as a DM off uh, to deal with this necromancer. And one of the ways that you were supposed to deal with this necromancer is to get this small orb that happens to be at the end of a dungeon crawl, and this orb has the ability to sort of rudimentarily stop this guy from being able to utilize his powers. It'll destroy undead within a certain radius if activated. Don't you think that that necromancer would want to have that particular piece of artifact in his possession where he knows it's not going to fuck him over? It's the exact same adventure. The reason they're going is has changed, and
Yeah, they still have to fight
they
the
have let it.
dungeon. They still have to take on any
Yeah.
monsters that are in there. And I mean, you could even use that as a possible MacGuffin. It's like now that you've proven your allegiance to the necromancer and you've shown that you're like willing to like go the distance, then maybe he can use that orb to like help maybe like a cleric or a wizard who wants to dabble in raising the, skeleton army themselves. And then next thing you know, he's got generals.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of those moments where when your players kind of write that story in, it changes the flavor, it changes the feel, the adventure itself. The you have to go to a cave to get thing for reasons. The reasons have changed, but the going through has not. And because that particular reason changed, and it's the players that made that change because this is the way that they're wanting to go, they will instantly become more invested in the reason they're going in there. They'll fight harder, they'll push better, and they'll enjoy the adventure more
And they'll
than,
like the fact
we
that
gotta fight this guy.
and they like the fact that they made an impact on the world.
Oh yes, yes. Impact is key for your players, so yeah, remember that. It's really important. Don't blow up a Drow city or attempt to. That was bad choice.
Right.
Yeah.
So if even if it's not something as game like dynamically game changing as your possibly good aligned PCs or neutral aligned PCs finally tipped over and decided to join the side of evil. even if they just want to do something different. Like let's do a more maybe mission-based kind of game like Shadowrun, where what
Oh,
a lot of times what you'll find during like downtime actions, this can be in D&D or anything, uh, is the players want to like work towards a goal or do something along like something that's kind of condensed into a downtime action. But maybe one of the things they want to do, they you can expand upon that and actually make a full adventure out of it. And you don't have to actually deploy that immediately. You can have that to the side, so maybe even if on a rainy day or something, you can pull out this mission, and it's just like, yeah, I wanted to go make an alliance with the mob boss of this district of town. And it's like, all right, well, you're doing during your downtime, you're like getting in touch with contacts, figuring out where he is, and actually like setting up the meeting. And then like the game could be later down on the line when the mob boss actually has time, because you got to be operating on his time. Then that's when you could put out the mission, because it'll still be relevant, just later on. And you can,
yeah,
I know what you like doing, Xander, and I know Jesse did this a couple times. Is you'll have like three or four like things that you just have in your back pocket that are just ready to go in case somebody's like, I don't feel like doing the main quest or whatever. Like,
yeah,
let's try something different. And it's like, all right, you go to the local tavern job board. On it you see like a wanted poster for this nasty looking dude with his fucking grizzled beard and like an eye patch for some amount of money, and then you have like two or three other things. Like that's straight up just letting the players pick the quest.
yeah. Yeah, the job posting board is a great way to get PCs into an adventure. It's also the most generic, so unless they're looking at it intentionally, try to steer away. But it's a great way to start out if you're new to being a GM. It's a great means. It's a trope for a reason, you know. But uh, in dealing with like say Shadowrun, Shadowrun's a perfect example of when to have these things in your back pocket. So whenever I'm sitting down and I'm taking my notes and everything to kind of get a campaign started. This is at the beginning. This is part of the campaign planning phase. You look at your characters' backstories. You take out key NPCs and things that they used to do. You know, what did their parents do for a living? Could this particular thing have some ramifications? Like, your dad used to be a like a hitman for the mob. Suddenly, you got to go and catch dear old dad because he got in the wrong side for some people that he used to work for. And now the plot is personal. And if they decide to kind of the rails, you've got that kind of plot in your back pocket. And you can say, oh, okay, so you guys go to this other town that you haven't been to before. The main plot's happening over here, but you guys go to this random town. All I have to do is pull out of my pocket this particular adventure and say, so you guys come into the town. It's fairly small. There's a bit of a dirt street that leads toward a large chapel in the center of town. Everything's kind of built up around it. It's sort of rustic Germanic style, very peaked roofs and what have you, a bit of snowfall on the ground. And as you walk in, you see a kind of shady cloaked figure dash across the street. He doesn't seem to be he seems to be kind of out of place. When you say stuff like that, players are like, oh, okay, so we got to go catch this guy. When you catch him, you know, he's trying to get information from one point to another without being seen, but he got caught by the players. Shocker, I know. But he's got this information and he's like, look, don't kill me. I'll give you whatever it is. And so it's like, fine, give me your money and give me this note. I want to read it. And at the top of it is player character's dad's name. It's a charge for his life. So now they're like, oh shit, we gotta go find my dad, man. And the adventure kind of pulled away from the main story, but you can use that to tie it back in.
Yeah, you
Because
can
maybe,
always
yeah,
use player backstories and the NPCs they've met along the way to kind of be able to alter what you're doing at the drop of a hat. Um, but a technique that I like using is and this really works better for longer campaigns or people you've been playing with for a while. But an important aspect is not just trying to figure out what the PCs are going to do, but what the players are going to do, because there's certain proclivities that every player has, including myself, including Xander, and including Jesse, who
Oh yeah.
very much likes to jump off of various high places in any game he plays, no matter what character it is. And so what you can do is what I'll do in my notes actually is if something comes up and there's either like a diverted path or some kind of moral quandary or something that I'm kind of, or even just a setting that I know is going to end up showing up, and I know a certain player is going to be part of that adventure, then I'll type out a little bullet point thing that just says, okay, this player may do this weird thing here, and if it's not exactly like you're expecting them to do it, and if even if you are kind of like expecting them to do it, what I usually do is I don't put out like the whole deal that happens afterwards. I'll just make maybe a couple bullet points, just like this thing might happen or this thing might happen. But otherwise, I don't detail it out any further than that, because if it does happen, then you can roll with the punch. You kind of know what generally should happen, and if it doesn't happen, you haven't wasted however much creative power and time that it took to plan that whole thing out.
Yeah. So on the topic of adjusting notes, whenever dealing with uh, a sudden shift uh, from uh, from from things, knowing your players as players is a really a uh, good metric to go by. Like with Jesse and even myself, jumping off of high things. That's it's a good thing to know about your players.
Especially if you're
But
playing a monk like you are that has to jump and run on every conceivable surface.
oh, absolutely.
Knowing what
Like
those
I
surfaces are is very useful.
absolutely. It's like sandstone. I'm gonna break it. Ha 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 ha. But if you have a group full of people that either they're new to D&D or whatever game system you're playing, or they're just new to you as a GM, being able to anticipate their movements because of your experience with them and your knowledge about that person and how they play their particular play style, not really going to be there. Like Nick can most of the time predict what Kenton's going to do because he's seen like, a half a dozen characters of mine and how they operate, and all of my characters kind of run the same vein generally. Most people are like that, except for there's a few exceptions out there, but more to the point, how do you anticipate the players that you don't know? And that's a really heavy kind of undertaking, especially if you're new to the game or even new to GMing. Nick, how have you been able to anticipate players that you don't know well enough to really roll with the punches because of your knowledge of them?
Well, uh, if I'm playing with like a brand new group, I'll usually start out like the first game or two a little more railroady than I would normally get.
Uh huh.
Just so it kind of focuses everyone on unified path at least right at the beginning, and then it can kind of branch out from there. That way, I can kind of have a better idea of what I might be expecting. One of the things that I always do, well, maybe not always do, most of the time, is I will be a part of character creation for any of the characters, or oh, the thing that I did with everybody in Legends of Latir.
Oh,
It was a
absolutely.
one-on-one background game where it was like an
Oh yeah.
hour and a half, as little mostly narrative campaign mission that it was like depending on who it was, like I would either have like this transition from childhood to adult or whatever, and or just some random mission that they
Mhm.
would have to go on as part of their backstory, just to catch them up with the party or whatever needs to happen. And that way you can have like this kind of vacuum uh, example, so you can kind of see how the player is going to think, before they even get into the rest of the party. And so based on how somebody solves problems, I'll like make mental notes of it. I usually don't like write down what they're doing because I'm in the moment and just letting it happen as it happens. But if I notice somebody is like coming up with like super creative solutions to things, then I'll keep that in mind, even if I won't exactly write notate it. Um, but I'll keep it in mind for when like they do the first combat or when their first dungeon happens or first
Mhm.
mission, whatever it happens to be. And a lot of times, a big thing about it is being able to roll with the punches. I used that phrase already, but it's really important
Mhm.
because players, no matter how new or how experienced, especially like super new players that have never done tabletop before, you will see some batshit crazy things coming out of them. And
Oh yeah.
if if you don't have any notes or anything, that's fine. You just have to be able to like go with it because it's a cooperative storytelling thing. So
Mhm.
if a player says something they want to do and it's within the mechanical realms of their PC to do, then figure out a way to write it into the story. If you have to take a couple seconds to think about it, that's totally fine. You'll know, Xander. I know you notice this because somebody will say, "I want to do this crazy ass thing," and I'll be like, "All right, hold on."
With a sigh.
Yeah. And then I'll think about it for a few, like maybe even a minute or two, just to see um, the effects that would have, if it would break the game in any way, if
Mhm.
it's not a part of the rules. Like if there's something that I'm usually not a fan of people checking the rule books in the middle of a session, but if there's something like really important that could make or break something that happened, then yeah, you might want to take a couple minutes to look it up. Last night was a good example.
Oh yeah.
When you jumped, when you ran up the wall, jumped and tried to tackle that giant bat, and you fell 60 feet, your monk ability lets you pretty much you slow fall and negate that whole thing. But then you tried
Yeah.
it again in the same turn, and that's when I was like, hold on a minute. I don't know if you can just keep doing that. So I quickly looked it up, and you had to use your reaction for it. Now that was
Yep.
important because otherwise you weren't taking many d6s worth of fall damage, which could have vastly changed how the results of the game turned out.
Mhm. Yeah. And so in that kind of that moment, being able to kind of roll with the punches, as you said, is a really important skill to have. My personal means by doing that is to just practice DM games, do a lot of one shots, and don't feel bad if you make a mistake or if you're not great at it your first time. You're not gonna be. Like I still have eons worth of room for improvement. So don't feel like you can't do it. It just takes a lot of time, a lot of practice. These are skills that me and Nick and Jesse and a lot of the great GMs out there is stuff we've all picked up over time. It takes a lot of effort and a lot of kind of personal reflection on your DMing style to really kind of be able to roll with the punches like that. One of the ways that I do it personally is I'll have four different documents, each which have different purposes. The four documents, I like to do an intro and an outro, kind of bookends the session. So we're at beginning. You say you have a thing that you say every time when you begin. Like Nick
You
says,
have four
uh,
documents for this?
yes. Well, not this. This is one of the
Well, I mean, out of
documents.
all of them, I have one document that I pull up.
Well,
You
yeah,
do,
I have
you do
four.
this like you way more detailed and all this crap than I am, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you flex a lot easier than I do. But yeah, so
What are the other documents? You got your
all right.
intro, your outro.
Uh I have a game content document. This content document has the master plot. This is the reason the game is being played. This is the concept I had for the game, and it has all of the annotations for how the story has changed it and the major kind of points. It also has the gods that are there. Uh, it has the general kind of uh, the economic systems and the different phases kind of set down into a couple of acts. It's pretty brief, 5-6 pages worth of notes, starting about 10 right now with my campaign. Just little tidbits, a lot of bullet points. The second document is I call my chapters document, and this is what I have laid out in a line. And before every session, I have this kind of planned out. It has all of the important NPCs for that session. It has a list of all of the items that they could come across in whatever dungeons, has all the traps, has all of the major points for the campaign, any descriptions that I want to kind of get specific, like you walk into the cave, you smell a bit of mold as you walk in. It's going to be annotated there so that I can remember to say that you smell mold. And the final document, and this is, I believe, the most important one. This is called the world list. It
Okay.
is a list of all of the cities, all of the small villages, uh, all of the locations within those cities, like what
Okay.
bartering
This
system and
this
all that
was
stuff.
this wasn't as extreme as I originally thought when you listed this out. I actually have similar stuff, except I just kind of break it down into one document for places, which I don't even open all the time. Usually I just keep that in the saved on drive for
Hmm.
if I actually need it. Uh, then I got characters that I don't have I don't really like specifically list them in my session numbered document that I actually pull up for the real game, but its own list of just I always break it down into the good, the bad, and the neutral, which is just basically how they are represented in the world and in relation to the party.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Obviously, bad guys go in the bad, and the neutral is usually the biggest one because most people you
It's
might
most of the gray
not.
blobs.
It's well, not gray blobs, but people you might not interact with all the time.
Hmm.
I mean, shit, for the longest time, Kelvin was in the neutral. And
Yeah.
then he became more important, so I transferred him over to the good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah, but
Um,
so I mean, basically the way I break down my actual session document, if you want to know, is I'll use bold typeface for. I just break it down into three acts, and it's mostly just to show kind of where you are in the session.
mhm.
But otherwise, you don't necessarily need that. I'll use italics for shit that'll actually straight up read verbatim from there, and then everything else is like, all right, so and so is doing this thing. There's a guy, he's here. He's got a name that you should randomly generate or whatever. But you actually brought up something that I almost forgot about, and that is for new GMs, that whole system, yours and probably even mine, might be a little too unwieldy for somebody who doesn't have any or very little experience.
Uh-huh.
Uh, One of my friends who is a GM for many games that I've played in, one of his favorite things is random tables. You could give him a book just full of tables that he can roll on, and he will craft an amazing game just randomly. And there are tables for everything if you need help with stuff. We'll use D&D as a base example because it's super popular and all that. Xanthar's Guide to Everything. It has straight up random tables for a bunch of names,
Oh
first and
yeah.
last names. So and for different races too. So if you just need to find somebody, then you could just roll it right out and be like, all right, his name is Jurgen von Schnitzelpupen, and that word those none of those are in. Well, Jurgen probably is in there.
Yeah,
Uh,
probably into the Vikings.
you got, but there's like tables for items if you just need to have a random item. There are this in the DMG. There are tables for like environments or cities or pretty much
Oh
whatever
yeah.
you need until if like they just randomly fuck off in a direction towards this town that you need to suddenly have. Then you could just
Yeah.
take literally like 2 minutes and generate an entire thriving thing without much effort.
Yeah, random tables are really good. I use constantly. Like, I write a lot of stuff for my games. I put a lot of effort into the the notations and everything. And I still
Yeah, you
use the
do.
crap out of some tables. I, I use so many
Oh
tables.
yeah, no, dude, I'm all about the random nonsense.
Another good thing, if this is more along the lines if you're playing online, uh, more specifically if you're using Roll20, have a couple of pre-gen like maps that you've made that are just kind of generic. That way, if you have to go into combat on a on the fly, you can just kind of draw it with your little pencil tool, the map, and toss a couple of random tokens on there.
Yeah,
But if
it
you have something pre-prepared, it's always adds a little bit more flavor.
Yeah, I mean it's effectively like having a an actual battle mat like you would in physical space, where you're
Oh
not
yeah.
going to have like these super detailed things all the time, but if you need to and somebody's like, "Yeah, I'm just going to fight this guy." And you're like, "What?" Okay, so
Okay.
you quickly draw out the map, you put the figures on or whatever you're using to represent the characters and the guys they suddenly decided to fight. And then I mean it's the same thing online, just you don't have to have super detailed maps. I know Xander and I do because we'll spend a lot of time on them. But there are some maps that
Hmm.
I've straight up I just have just in case I need to flip to them and just like this is a generic like 30 by 30 grid that I could just plop some characters on and then go.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's totally acceptable, and something that you should do if you're playing online. If you're not,
And if you're using grids.
yes, if you're using grids. I like to use grids personally. Helps me keep a visual space, and it works really good for fifth ed because a lot of the things are specific to how your character can move around and everything. A long time I couldn't stand using grids, and I realized this kind of like a kind of what I call the monster blob effect. It's all of your player characters are getting ready to fight these five guys, and they kind of blob around one, then they blob around the second, then they blob around the third,
What?
and that kind
Hold
of
on.
prevents that.
Wait, hold on, you fuck. I don't. What do you mean blob around? Blob, last
So
I checked, wasn't a verb.
okay, so I call it blobbing, which is basically all 8 squares around a medium-sized creature. There's 8 possible places for them to be,
Hmm.
and without a battle map, there's not really a. It's all it's all visuals in the head, kind of. It's all verbal,
Right.
and you just like so. You come across the samurai. He draws his sword. He's preparing to fight. What do you do? Oh, well, I'm gonna go up to him and I'm gonna attack him. Okay, cool. Whack. You hit. Great. Damage. Next person. Oh, I'm gonna attack him too. Okay, so you run up too. You're on the left side. All right, you're on the right side. All right, there's only one place for you to be, and you're right behind him. Kind of. So they kind of end up
Yeah, I
circling
think.
around them randomly.
Yeah, but I think if you're doing it full narrative like that, you shouldn't really like care that much about specific positioning. Like I would if I was that second guy going in combat, I would be like I dash beside my partner, sliding behind the guy and then striking at him. The next person could theoretically say something similar to that, and as long as like it's literally not a super clusterfuck, then that seems like it's easy to keep track of for me as a player
Yeah.
and as a GM. That's why I always prefer narrative over the grids. I only use the grid because everybody else needs it.
Yeah. See, like those are like the reasons why I like to use the grids. I'm fairly narrative in the right setting and for the right game, uh, but I like to have a physical representation of the space, and it helps both me and I feel the players visualize what's going on. But that's just my style.
Right,
Everybody
right.
has their style. Nick, you're definitely more of a theater of the mind kind of guy, and I can respect that. And
Yeah.
Shadowrun was it was so amazing in that.
Yeah,
You theater the mind of that really
I
good.
never used grids. I did use maps, but that was only when you were actually getting blueprints for things and you needed an actual map to plan out your movements.
Yeah. Um. So yeah. Keep detailed notes, and if you are going to use random tables, and this is a place that they might visit again, you never know. Uh,
Yeah,
totally write that down.
just make a note of
Totally write that down.
whatever just happened, and then you can go from there. Uh,
Yeah.
well, one trick you could use is if it's like if it might be getting late or something like that, and they suddenly take a left turn, then that's perfectly fine for you to like maybe call game a few minutes early, and then just plan out an epic adventure instead of like winging it. But speaking of winging it, let's talk about winging it and improvising. How to like do that so that way your game's still entertaining and fulfilling to the players.
Okay.
So let's let's say you just want to go with go with the flow and do this new thing that the players have thought up to do, and you don't have any notes for it. Let's say that you straight up have nothing. Uh, One thing to really keep in mind is the setting, because you can improvise and build whatever you need a lot of times in the blink of an eye just from knowing your setting, like where they are and like the characters themselves. If they need to visit like a town, the first thing is like what setting are you using? Are you using like Forgotten Realms, something you made? If it's a different game, like Seattle from Shadowrun, uh,
Mm.
or or just any like pre-written town. A lot of times you'll already have enough information to go from there, and you don't have to like drag it out either. Like if they're looking for somebody, like you might have them ask around to some like random gray blob NPCs, or maybe just a quick investigation or searching role kind of thing, and then they could just straight up find who they need to find. And these people you can make up on the fly. Like I always start with like how they look, so that way I kind of you can use tropes. I use tropes a lot in this. Um, so describe how they look. Uh, I always add a little bit of flavor thing to distinguish them from the other gray blob NPCs, and then you can as you're describing it, usually you can kind of like try to think of how their personality might be. Let's say it's a Western setting, and so they walk into a saloon looking for a bartender. Uh, Now, you already have your stage set. It's a Western saloon. You probably have like the circular wooden tables, a bunch of guys wearing cowboy hats, carrying six shooters. You think of the bartender. He's probably kind of a rough man. Like he's probably tall and imposing, especially if he's in a bad part of town. And he's probably got like some muscle on him. He's probably wearing like um, whatever clothes you want. They could be dirty or clean depending on the situation. If we're going with the rough side of town, probably a little dirty. Got some dust in it. How clean? Like, is he shaved or is he got a beard? Maybe he's got a beard, but he doesn't have like a good razor, so it's like short, but fairly well kept. And like he's got a hardness to his eyes because he's seen some shit. He's seen the shootouts that go on in here, and by the time you've gotten through that description, you kind of already know what he's going to be like. You come in, he probably has a Western accent, and he's like, "What the hell you doing here? You're not
Yeah.
part of this. You're not a part of this town. Where'd you blow in from?" Like he could immediately be like suspicious of them, especially if it's a newcomer, or maybe he's welcoming.
Yeah. It depends. A good way to find an NPC more specifically, if you have to improv on the fly, and you're the kind of person that likes to associate a voice to the person. Uh, Remember, back some time ago, we have three choices: medium, low, high. That's your pitch range, and then the seven dwarfs. Really easy to kind of fall into, and if you have a general idea there of what their voice is going to sound like, and you can come up with that in less than a couple of seconds, and that how they sound is atypically associated with how they're probably going to look as well. So if they're sleepy and low, they might sound like this, and they're kind of just they're over it. Their eyes are real low. They're kind of sluggishly moving around, and they're probably not well shaven if you're in a modern setting, or they're not very well kept in a fantasy setting. They might have big stain on their shirt or on their apron or whatever, and they're just cleaning a glass kind of haphazardly, sets it down on the bar. That voice kind of gives you the personality right off the bat. So there's a few different
Hmm.
ways to kind of improvise for an NPC.
Yeah, lean on
Kind of just
tropes. Like you can fall back on staples. The way I build random guys is that I'll try to make it flow with the story, so that way, as I'm describing it, I'm actually completing the character in like the background, my subconscious. So by the time I'm done, it doesn't seem like I've actually made up something on the fly. It almost like this was a planned ordeal that you're suddenly finding yourselves in a part of.
yeah. Another really good means by which to do that. Uh, let's say you are planning to send your player characters to Rivenhan. And Rivenhan is a little river town. It's got a mill. You have the NPCs all laid out. You know who runs the inn. You know who is running the general store. You already know all of these things. You have ideas and generations for the way they sound and everything. You already have all that planned. But instead of going to Rivenhan, they decide they want to go over to that town because there's something more interesting over there. Uh, okay, great. You pick up Rivenhan, knock the mill off the side of it, add a granary, plop it over there.
Yep.
You already have all the NPCs and they're ready to go.
And
Uh, so
popular
yeah,
TV shows and shit, they do this all the time. Let me use the fucking Officer Jenny effect from Pokemon, where it's like, why is the same lady everywhere? There's been lazier writing and more
totally.
popular things. So whatever you do is probably gonna be fine.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to pick and pull from like your favorite TV shows or books that you like. Uh, One of the first rules of D&D is that you're not going to do anything uh, that's that's not really been pulled on before. So don't feel like you're being untrue to the spirit of the game if you borrow things.
Hmm.
Perfect example of this, off the coast of a island kind of nation that my player characters were running around in, is this tiny little island, and this island is owned by a drow man, and this drow man can't realistically go out into these fields and tend to these flowers that he uses to brew potions,
Oh, that guy.
but he can hire someone who doesn't really get liked around in society. So he built a city for them because he was pretty well to do, and he chose goblins because goblins, they need a place to stay. They're not all evil. Maybe you don't know. They might all be evil in your setting, but in my setting, they're not. And so there's a city of goblins, the Goblin City, and the Drow Man is the Goblin King. Take a wild guess where I pulled that from.
Oh, I'm gonna guess David Bowie from Labyrinth.
Precisely. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with picking and pulling from your favorite movies and TV shows and books and things to draw inspiration because that's where inspiration comes from.
And
It's
something else
great
that
for winging it too.
when the players are invested in a story, even if all you had was a hook, a lot of times the players will give you better ideas than even you had to begin with. So
Oh my
if they
god,
come up
yes.
with a theory like this, say there's like a murder they need to investigate, and they come up with like this idea that there's like some corruption going on somewhere else, and they're like this leads to X and Y and Z and all that, and you're sitting there like in your brain, damn, that's better than what I got.
I didn't
Then
think of that. It's just the guy down the street. Jesus.
then you could be like, all right, hold on, give me a second. Like, not, don't actually say that, but you can write down what they're thinking, and you're like, all right, that's a good idea, because then they've crafted a better story. Honestly,
Hmm.
it'll give you more content to work with, and you can even tweak what they did a little bit, just to make it so that way they didn't just predict the whole thing. But when they solve the mystery, it's like, oh shit, we were right. This is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, 'cause when the player character does something and they did it right and it's awesome and that moment is really great and it can be completely not what you had down in your notes, and that's
Yeah,
okay
but don't do
because the
that
players
too
are going to give you
much.
shit.
Don't do that too much, or else then they'll start catching on that that might be happening. And
Oh yeah,
also, you should really be working to make better stories yourself.
yeah. This is a labor of love. It will drive you insane. It will keep you up at night. It will. I promise you, it will give you migraines trying to
So,
come up with something.
so
It really
Xander,
will.
there's something I want to tell you because this was hilarious to me the whole time. So, there are some GMs, including me, where there might be the entire game where you just make it up as you go along. Let me tell you about last night's game that I made up from the time I started talking to the end. Completely ad libbed.
Oh wow, really?
I did not plan any of that. So it was funny because Andrew, who plays our barbarian Karks, I talked to him on Sunday, and he was like, "So Nick, could you give me any of the inside scoop for it?" It's like, "I know you won't." I was like, "Yeah, sure, I will." And he's like, "Wait, what?" And I looked him dead in the eye, and I was like, "I don't have shit. I have no idea what's gonna happen. We're gonna find out." So I when we started the game, I went through the description because I knew where you guys left off, so that was my starting point. And like
Mhm.
the big plot I had still had that in my head. I knew where you guys were like flavor wise and setting wise. And you started off talking to the mayor because that's where you ended the game. So I was like, all right, let's see, what can I give him to do that would be cool, that might link up to the main story, uh, and go from there. So as he was giving you the tour, I was like, okay, some guy went missing. So I just thought of that. By the way, that guy's name is randomly generated. I just pulled up Xanathars and just rolled for it, and then I was like, okay, you get he's want you decided to help him out, so you're gonna find this guy, and so you went to go check his house. What would his house probably be like? So I just kind of thought about that as you were walking to it, and I just came up with the basic stuff. And then it's like, well, it's about finding this guy, so let's give some clues as to why, like, what he was doing to help lead him along. And you found those clues by searching his house and all that. And then I think Jess asked about anybody he might know who might know where he went. So I was like, sure, there is somebody named Roll Dice, Roll Dice. Yeah, this. And so that led you to the saloon that I had there. And then I mean, I thought it was pretty obvious. I just decided at one point that they were all going to have southern accents there. And
Dude, I noticed. I was like, "This is a western,
it's like,
motherfucker. This is a
I was
western."
just like, I was like, fuck it, whatever. I'm just gonna have them all have southern accents. I'm gonna have like this neat design area that still fits within the setting that I've already laid out. And I actually didn't know where I was gonna put what did I name her, or what did she ended up being named? Like
I can't remember what it was. It was randomly generated.
right. Um, I could look it up, but I'm not going to. But I didn't even know she was going to be the one playing the piano originally. I had the music going on in the background, and I was like, they're talking to the bartender, or I need to put her somewhere in here. And it's like, oh shit, why not put her as one of the set pieces? She's the one playing the piano. So went to talk to her, and then you guys did totally go out of left field when Karks decided to get drunk and all those shenanigans took place, and you tried
And then,
blowing
and
up the
then
city.
I tried blowing up the city. Nepo hit on Karks to get free drinks.
Craziness ensued, which worked out fine for me because during that time I was making the map for for the fight. I was also designing those monsters. So so I was like, all right, perfect. This is fine. They could do whatever they want, typing and like dragging and dropping and all that stuff. And then you guys ended up finding out where I was. I was like, I deployed these monsters that I came up with that were heavily inspired by Diablo enemies. And
Yeah, I picked that up.
yeah, I mean, I play Diablo a lot, so I was like, I think this is cool. Why don't they have something that just has like a fucking sonic ranged attack? Like that seems like it would be cool and fantasy like. So
Yeah.
I had them do
And then
that.
flying. Oh my god, that was so hard
I know it was
for the
hard.
monk who does things on the ground. The
I
barbarian
so
hucking
I
freaking
went
javelins.
I went back and I actually, because I did write out the entire monster stats while you guys are doing all that other stuff. And when I went back and like compared it to shit in the actual monster manual, that was like each of those guys was like a CR 3 or 4 monster, but because they were all flying and it wasn't a location conducive to being able to move vertically very easily, then it made it a harder encounter, which actually was cool.
Oh yeah.
I liked how you guys solved the problems, and then uh, you guys haven't found out anything further from there because Meepo stole that guy's shit. Um,
Yeah.
so I won't tell you any spoilers on that. But like I figured out what was in the pack. Like some of it was randomly generated, like what items he would have. Some of them were just like logical leaps. Like okay, he's going out on this exploration thing. He's got like rope, he's got pythons, he's got rations, that kind of thing. And there's probably a couple other things in there that if you ever look, you might find. But yeah,
Mhm.
that whole game from the time I said tonight on Legends of Latier to next time was just I don't know what's going on.
Ad lib. Yeah. You see that right there, ladies and gentlemen, listening at home. That is the mark of someone who can improvise. I have done that before, and the adventures turn out interesting. But you know,
So it works because
I need to have things written.
if you don't have anything planned, one of the cool things is like it's real easy to roll with the punches because you don't know where you're going to begin with. So you're just kind of like ragdolling around as God, flapping around through the setting as the players
I
do their
don't know what
shit.
to do. Yeah, yeah. It takes a lot of practice to get there, but if you practice, you too can be like Nick and yeah, uh, come up with stuff completely on the fly. And some of the best things that happen within a game as a both a player and as a GM are the things that just kind of happen out of nowhere. It's the things that you're not really expecting, or more importantly, the things that the players generate themselves. A lot of the time, it's the best stories that can be told. The players are really invested in it, and so don't be afraid to kind of to lean into it and work on your improvisation skills. Have plenty of notes and stuff that you can kind of fall back to if you need to have a question. Lots of rollable tables.
Yeah,
Uh,
the randomness of
yeah,
dice should never be discounted. I mean, that's how Daikatana showed up. It was like some random
yeah.
dude who had just rolled really well consistently, and he was a gray blob initially, and then turned out to be a fucking hero. So,
Yep.
uh, whatever the dice say, like if you want to take that at face value, then you never know what could come out of it. Like you can come up with some really neat story uh, adventures or events or just consequences for dice rolls or what the players have to say. And since you're all there for fun, then even like off the wall stuff, it's like, I mean, there's a lot of ad lib when it comes to storytelling. I know
Hmm.
that Akira Toriyama, when he writes Dragon Ball, he's basically just doing it by the seat of his pants. And look how successful that whole franchise has been.
Oh yeah.
So you too can bullshit your way out of all sorts of situations, and you can definitely learn something from all that bullshitting and randomness and the unpredictability overall from players from any genre or any game or anything really. And
Hmm.
you can make note of that. Keep keep that in mind for every game until we see you next time on Playing God.